Hey, Zach here. Today we're going to be exploring the Patapsco Valley State Park. There's going to be a lot of history, a lot of nice scenery, and some good railroad history, especially towards the end. The trail goes all along the old main line, so hopefully we'll see some trains too. I hope you'll come along with me. The Patapsco is one of the major rivers flowing through central Maryland on a meandering course toward the Chesapeake Bay. The name Patapsco itself is derived from the Algonquian Potapscut, which to the indigenous people of the area meant backwater. The various branches of the Patapsco originate in upstate Maryland, with the northern branches stemming from Carroll County in the vicinity of Westminster, and the south branch rising just south of Mount Airy. The main stem of the Patapsco begins in the vicinity of Marriottsville, at the confluence of the north and south branches. From there, it travels 39 miles, mostly flowing through narrow valleys before emptying out into the Baltimore Harbor. As this port grew in importance in the 18th century, so too did the river feeding it. Beginning in the 1770s, the Patapsco River Valley exploded into what some have called the cradle of industrial revolution in Maryland. Industries like iron, grist, paper, and textile mills sprouted up along the Patapsco, often using the power of the river to operate their machinery. Around these industries, settlements built up such as Ilchester and Ellicott's Mills, the current-day Ellicott City. The Patapsco River Valley grew to such prominence that it hosted not one, but two transportation firsts in the country. The first being the National Road, the first federally funded interstate corridor which passed through Ellicott's Mills in the early 19th century. Later, in 1830, the first commercial railroad in America, the Baltimore and Ohio, built their initial 13 miles of track to largely service the growing population and industry of the Patapsco Valley. The valley even hosted the first attempt at telecommunications, albeit very briefly, as the first electrical telegraph message was sent by Samuel Morse in 1844 along experimental wires between Baltimore and Washington. Wire that crossed the Patapsco Valley at the famous Thomas Viaduct. The contents of that message? A quote from the Bible, "What hath God wrought?" Indeed, looking at the relatively humble beginnings of our transportation and communication networks compared to the intricate systems of today, I contemplate a variation of that message, "What hath man wrought?" While the early 19th century saw the peak of industrialization for the Patapsco River Valley, it was the very river these industries harnessed that ultimately drove them away. You see, the Patapsco Valley is prone to flooding, and a series of destructive floods through the late 19th to mid-20th centuries helped to either wipe many businesses out or drive them away. One of the most destructive events in recent history occurred in June of 1972, when Hurricane Agnes swept through, causing catastrophic flooding throughout the eastern United States. Agnes is notorious for the amount of destruction it caused. In the Patapsco Valley, the storm destroyed roads that have never been rebuilt, damaged railroad tracks that needed extensive repairs, washed away buildings, and essentially left the area looking like a war zone. While many locations that were affected by Agnes eventually recovered, there was so much lost forever to history from this one storm that I could fill 100 videos talking about it. For now, though, let's move to the present, where much of the Patapsco River Valley is home to Maryland's second largest state park. Established in 1907, the Patapsco Valley State Park is Maryland's oldest park. It encompasses 14,000 acres spread out over a number of distinct regions, as shown here. Today, I'll be exploring the region containing the Avalon, Orange Grove, Glen Artney, and Hilton areas. In this somewhat busy map, we can see the large number of trails in this region alone. I'll be parking in the Lost Lake lot indicated here and walking the full length of the Grist Mill Trail to its terminus in Ilchester. The park entrance is just off of Route 1, in between Highways 195 and 895. Just inside the entrance, we are greeted by the Thomas Viaduct that acts as a gateway of sorts. If you haven't seen my video on this historic bridge, I encourage you to check it out too. Just beyond the bridge, the B&O's old main line is just up the hill on the right here, which we can see more easily in this aerial shot. We can also see the Interstate 95 bridge crossing the valley ahead. We can see that same 95 bridge high above us here. Soon we come to the intersection with Gun Road. Turning left here would take us to the Orange Grove parking area on the western side of the river, which we will visit later. For now though, we will go right to access the Lost Lake parking lot. Before leaving this spot though, I want to point out that we are essentially in the middle of what used to be the Avalon Nail and Iron Works, depicted here. This facility evolved from the older Dorsey Mill that stood on the same site from the late 18th century. And at its peak in the 1850s, it was producing nails and rails for the B&O Railroad. This print also shows the company village that grew around the mill to house the workers. Both the mill and the village were destroyed in a major flood that struck the area in 1868, and the plant was never reopened. Of the original village, only a few structures still survive, including the duplex house seen here. Continuing on, after turning right onto Gun Road, I completely missed the old Gun Road Stone Arch Bridge on the left. Thank goodness for Google Street View. Gun Road and this bridge were originally built under George Washington's direction in 1777 during the Revolutionary War, for the purpose of moving cannons or guns from the Dorsey Forge to Elk Ridge Landing. Just ahead we can see Gun Road continuing across the old main line train tracks. This crossing has been closed for as long as I have been coming here, likely to limit access into the state park. A left turn onto Glen Artney Road, and a short drive later, we arrive at the Lost Lake parking lot. Next to the parking lot is the Lost Lake itself. Originally, there was a dam in place here, creating a reservoir for the Avalon Mill and village. It was completely destroyed during Hurricane Agnes in 1972. This man-made pond is a recreation, rebuilt as part of the park's redevelopment. There are some remains from the original Avalon Dam, but they are hard to see at this time of year due to the abundant foliage. Here is a picture of the Avalon Dam site just after it was destroyed by Agnes. In the middle left, you can see the spot that the present-day Lost Lake occupies. And note the railroad bridge in the background. Across the road from Lost Lake, we see that same railroad bridge, the first of several that we will pass on this trail. This one, in its original form, carried the tracks over the Soapstone Branch Creek. It has been updated to also allow vehicular traffic to pass under the tracks. As you can see, the passage carries the creek alongside the road. On the other side, the road leads to some picnic areas and trailheads. I found this sign humorous, warning against wading or swimming in this little creek. At the end of the Lost Lake parking area, we find the proper start to the Grist Mill Trail, complete with plenty of signage warning to beware of flood conditions. There are a lot of these flood warnings throughout the trail, which are not unwarranted considering the history of flooding in the valley. Here is one of the many culverts under the railroad tracks. This one doesn't seem like the original construction. I always marvel at the tall trees along these trails. And the interesting dead trees. Soon we come to another bridge, looking to be mostly in its original state circa 1830. This bridge carries the railroad over Vineyard Springs Creek, and is also the start of the Vineyard Springs Trail. They've installed a wooden walkway here so hikers can access the trail without getting their feet wet. Back across the grist mill trail, we can see the Vineyard Springs continuing on its way toward the river. Just look at the natural beauty all around us on this trail. Hard to believe we are only a few miles out of Baltimore. And it's not all foliage. This little guy is enjoying his meal right next to the trail. We can just barely see the Patapsco through the trees to the left. I could not find the name of this next creek, but it did warrant a new wooden bridge for the trail and significant drainage infrastructure. The railroad bridge here looks mostly original, except for the portal itself and the concrete creek bed. There isn't a trail going through this one, however, and no walkway, so I decided not to walk through. The river is a lot closer to the trail here. And here are some interesting log benches to relax along it. This area with its sparse tree cover would be a great place to see a train on the old main line. Unfortunately, none came, yet. You can really tell autumn is here, with all of the fallen leaves on the trail. But there's still a lot of green ones on the trees, too. Another culvert that definitely looks original to the railroad's construction. Here we are coming up to the swinging bridge across the Patapsco on the left. But first, we're going to turn right and explore the ruins of the old Patapsco flouring mill, more commonly known as the Orange Grove Mill. Situated on the hillside between the old main line and the Patapsco, it was built in 1856. By the year 1900, it had grown to become the largest flour mill east of Minneapolis. At its peak, the mill produced up to 1,500 barrels of flour per day, which were shipped out via boxcar on the railroad. In the photo, we can see the dam that was present at the site, as well as the original swinging bridge on the right. Workers would cross this bridge from a company village that sat across the river. The mill was destroyed by fire in 1905 and was never rebuilt. Some residents of the worker village stayed around until about 1920, when the land was purchased by the Patapsco Forest Reserve. Most of the remnants of the mill and village, as well as the original swinging bridge, were washed away by Hurricane Agnes in 1972. Except for these remnants that we are approaching now. These ruins were part of the mill's warehouse. The open area is a chute through which railroad cars would drop coal to stock the power plant. From the top, you can see just where the rail cars would unload from. It's amazing how close the structure was to the tracks. There actually used to be a railroad station on the other side, just near the mill. Opposite the ruins sits the current version of the swinging bridge. With all the natural beauty on both sides, it's hard to believe the industrial history of this site. Upriver, where once there was a dam, now there is just free-flowing water. From the center of the bridge, we can get amazing views, both upriver and downriver. On the west side of the bridge is the Orange Grove parking area, featuring comfort facilities and access to various trails, including the River Road Trail, which follows the path of a road washed out by Hurricane Agnes. On my way back across the bridge, I noticed some old foundation walls along the river, surely related to the old mill. And back along the trail, more mill-related ruins. Looks like this area is prone to small rock slides. Autumn is definitely here. Look at all of these falling leaves. Almost like it's snowing. Here's another railroad bridge, this one carrying the tracks over a larger stream that I couldn't find the name of. This spot also marks the beginning of the Forest Glen Trail. This bridge is not the original, having been rebuilt in 1869, after the original was damaged in the flood the year before. On the other side of the bridge, the Forest Glen Trail goes off to the right. But I like to climb up along the bridge on the left here. Here we meet up with the Buzzards Rock Trail, which I will follow very briefly, because it gives easy access to get to the old main line tracks. I had hoped to be able to see the Ilchester tunnel in the distance, but unfortunately the tracks curve too much in that direction. As soon as I got back down to the bottom, I heard a train coming. There was no way to get back up there quickly, so I had to be content watching it from down below. This was a full coal train heading to Baltimore. We're back on the grist mill trail now, which at this point is right next to the Serene River. We're getting toward the latter part of the trail, which is my favorite part because it involves a lot of railroad history. And to kick that off, let's check out this historical marker on the building of America's first railroad. Essentially, this marker explains how the building of the first 13 miles of the B&O was an experiment of trial and error. B&O engineers considered 3 different rail architectures during initial construction. A good portion of the rail line was built using this left plan, where rails were fastened to granite slabs. Unlike current wooden railroad ties that are laid perpendicular to the rails, these granite slabs were laid parallel and directly underneath the rails, providing the base to which the rails were fastened. In this cross-section, we can see how the rails were strung to these granite slabs, or sills, sometimes called stringers. This granite-based railroad proved to be too cumbersome and costly to build, and ultimately wooden ties became the preferred track base, for their ease and relatively lower cost. When the railroad was redesigned, some of the remaining granite slabs were repurposed to build bridges and retaining walls, like the one seen here. We'll come back to these granite slabs a little later. The trail starts rising in elevation here as we approach the former site of Blurda's Dam. This hydroelectric dam was built in 1906 and named after German immigrant Victor Gustav Blurda, who financed the project. This was the first ever submerged hydroelectric plant, meaning that the power-generating machinery was housed under the spillway. It was also one of the earliest dams constructed of reinforced concrete. The dam continued to generate power until 1924, when it was closed due to competition from larger facilities. It had remained a fixture on the river for decades, even surviving Agnes largely intact. Unfortunately, I missed my chance at recording this historic structure, as it was completely removed in 2019. As it stands, a couple of historical markers and a new sitting area are all that remain here to commemorate that historic structure. Due to the dam removal project, the river is completely inaccessible in this area. Before we go any further down the grist mill trail, which from here on out is inextricably tied to the history of the B&O Railroad, I'm going to have to give a little bit of a historical background. We already know that the old main line of the B&O has paralleled both the river and our path the whole way so far. Well, at our current location, above the former site of the Blurda Dam, the tracks are no longer next to us. They are actually in a tunnel going through the neighboring hill. The Ilchester Tunnel was built in 1902 to straighten out a sharp curve in the original alignment of the tracks, shown here. So where we are standing is where the original alignment of the old main line starts to coincide with the current grist mill trail. Before continuing along the grist mill trail, let's backtrack a little bit. Roughly across the trail from the new Blurda Dam sitting area is the start of the Buzzards Rock Trail. And it turns out that this trail roughly follows the old alignment back toward where it would have met up with the current tracks. Immediately, we're rewarded for coming this way because the beginning of the trail is lined with the old granite slab ties that the B&O originally used for its tracks. Now these were obviously moved here purposely, maybe even during the dam removal process, but they are still very cool to see. And on some of them, you can even see where the rails were fastened to the granite, like here. And here. Back on that historical marker, I saw a picture of the granite slabs in the ground. Now I can't be sure that it was taken on this particular stretch of right-of-way, but it is possible. Could I possibly find any evidence of the granite ties that are still in their original location? Well, before too long I have my answer. Here we see an unmistakable section of lined-up granite, perfectly aligned with the direction that the track would have followed. Very cool. I looked for additional granite ties, but those were the only ones I could find. But I bet if I dug down along the path, I would find many more. Before too long, I did come up to the existing tracks, roughly marking the location where the original alignment met up with the current one. And looking west, I finally get my viewpoint for the Ilchester Tunnel. This tunnel is 1,400 feet long, and it used to be double-tracked, but was converted to single-track in the 60s. We can see someone looks to be either adventurous enough or stupid enough to attempt walking through the tunnel. They did eventually turn around, though, and good thing because a track maintenance truck came along shortly thereafter. Zooming way in on the tunnel, I can resolve the name and date plaque on the top. I can also just see the girder work of the bridge on the other side of the tunnel. As cool as it would have been to see a train coming through the tunnel, it was not meant to be. Next to my position on the tracks, I did find this stone marker, but I am unsure what its significance is. Back on the grist mill trail now, we're following the path of the original B&O alignment around the hill. From the air, we can see just how curved the original path of the tracks was. As we continue on, we can see the footbridge across the Patapsco, signifying the end of the grist mill trail. This impressive structure was built in 2006, and if it reminds you of a Bowman truss bridge, there is a reason for that, which we will get to soon. Upstream, we can see the current railroad trestle that carries the old main line out of the Ilchester Tunnel and over the Patapsco. And downstream we see the river winding through the valley towards the former Blurda Dam site. Here is the extensive drainage system where the Bonnie Branch empties out into the Patapsco. On the far side, the old abutments are visible, giving us our first indication that this footbridge was not the first span at this location. In fact, there were several bridges here before, for carrying the original alignment of the old main line across the river. The abutments that still sit on both sides of the river are actually left over from the first bridge, a stone arch bridge called the Patterson Viaduct, named after B&O director William Patterson. The bridge was built in 1829, making it one of the first railroad bridges built in the world. This view shows how it looked in 1859. Look how built up the west side of the bridge is at this point in time. Like many other things along the Patapsco, much of the Patterson Viaduct was lost in the aforementioned flood of 1868. After this flood, a temporary wooden structure was built to carry the tracks over the river until a replacement bridge could be completed. This replacement came in 1869 in the form of a Bowman Truss Bridge, favored at the time for their ease of construction compared to stone bridges. Here we are looking downstream on the Patapsco, and we can see that the truss bridge is using the remains of the Patterson Viaduct as its abutments. The surviving arch of the viaduct allowed for passage of River Road underneath. Here is another view of the Bowman Truss looking toward Ilchester. The Ilchester B&O Railroad Station is just on the other side of the bridge, and to the left is George Ellicott's Tavern, and above that is St. Mary's College, a Roman Catholic school built in 1868. None of the structures in this image survive to the present. This image, likely from the 1890s, is taken looking down at the Ilchester train station from the hills across the river. We can more easily see River Road passing under the arch. But even more interesting is the sliver of trestle that we can see on the far left. It does not look like the end of the Bowman Truss Bridge. This likely signifies that the truss was eventually replaced at this location, possibly for not being strong enough to carry the heavier trains of the times. Regardless, as that alignment of the railroad only lasted until Ilchester Tunnel was finished in 1902, whatever bridge was there at this time had its days numbered. Continuing across the present-day footbridge, we eventually come to Ilchester Road. Across the road, some stairs survive, likely related to one of the buildings seen in the previous pictures. Looking to the right down Ilchester Road, the original B&O alignment would have crossed the road and passed through the area where those cars are parked, before curving to the left and joining the path of the current tracks. Exploring that parking area more in depth, I found evidence of at least one of the granite ties still visible in the area. The rest of the right-of-way is totally overgrown. The current rail line exits the tunnel and crosses the river and the road here. I couldn't get many good vantage points from the ground, so let's take to the sky. Here we can clearly see the tracks exiting the tunnel and immediately starting across the bridge. This location, where the old and new alignments meet back up, was the new site of the Ilchester station, moved here once the tracks were realigned through the tunnel. Looking down the tracks, we get a clear shot through the tunnel. Definitely a lot straighter than the original path the tracks took around the hill. Looking to the west, the tracks continue to follow the river towards their original terminus in Ellicott City. On my way back, I hiked down along the side of the footbridge to get a better look at the old Patterson Viaduct arch, which still survives. This was the path that River Road took when the tracks were still here. From down along the river, we get a good view of the surviving abutments which now support the footbridge. We can also see a lot of the debris still left over from the dam removal efforts. Another great time for a train to come, but no such luck. So, having reached the end of my planned journey, I started to head back along the Grist Mill Trail. But fate had a cruel joke to play on me still. Another train came through the valley, and again when I was in one of the worst viewing positions. This one looked very interesting too, being a mixed freight, which I have rarely seen on these tracks. I ran to find a decent vantage point, eventually making it to this bridge, which wasn't too bad. I did try to move on to a better spot, but by then the train was finished. Oh well. With my day done, I got back to my car and exited the park. As the Thomas Viaduct came into view in the distance, I approached it with added respect. This amazing bridge has stood the test of time, surviving the many floods that have wiped out so much other history in the Patapsco Valley. It gives me hope that it will continue to watch over this beautiful park for years to come. Well, I hope you liked this visit to the Patapsco Valley State Park. We got to see a lot of nice scenery, a lot of historical things, but unfortunately we didn't have too much luck with the trains this time. I guess there's always next time. Let me know in the comments what your favorite part was. Don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss any future videos, and I'll see you next time.